Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Hey there, welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, where we're expanding the natural family planning conversation. I'm your host, Ellen Holloway. All right, we are welcoming Jamie Murphy to the podcast. Jamie, welcome.
Hello, it's so good to be here.
I am so glad to have you. So, Jamie is on here. We're going to be talking about, specifically, we're going to be talking about abstinence. And I'm excited to hear Jamie's story and just really talking about how abstinence has helped with growing her relationship and communication and things like that. Like where abstinence has helped. I mean, we'll also talk about not the great stuff, but we're gonna talk about the side of abstinence that I feel like we don't hear about a lot. So I'm really excited. So Jamie, could you just start by giving us an introduction to yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually met my husband in the fall of 2016 at an Eagle Eye retreat. So these were retreats held by the community of St. John. This one was specifically in Ohio, which is very funny. We only live an hour apart from each other, but we met in Ohio of all places. And so that kind of set the stage for our whole relationship, especially with the dating and discerning marriage. We were always sort of on the same page about NFP being our primary method of family planning. But I mean, I think every NFP week it comes up, right? You see the images of like couples frolicking in fields.
Literally frolicking in the field. Can I interrupt you and tell you such a funny story about one of those pictures? Had this woman this year in 2021's pictures, had this woman in this like white dress with flowers on it, like frolicking in the field. And she kind of looked like basically she was white and had blonde hair. And I was like presenting at all of the masses at my parish, and they used that picture as like the background picture for when I was talking at mass. And like, I'm just like, and I was wearing a dress that looked like hers. And I'm like, oh my gosh, why do I have to look like this woman?
I'm the NFP woman.
So the pastor even asked, like, is that a picture of you? I was like, no, it's not. I don't frolic in fields when I talk about NFP people.
Yeah. And so when we first learned a method, we learned Creighton. And, one of the things I'm really passionate about, even if you don't learn SymptoPro from me, is letting people know that there are options, because I swear trying to learn NFP as part of marriage prep was like meeting someone in a back alley and they handed you a list of phone numbers and you didn't know what anyone taught, but like, you're like, okay, I guess I'll just call the first person and see if they can teach me.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. I mean, it's terrible, but like,
yeah. I mean, that's what it felt like, because, it's kind of like, well, I heard that this person's friend's brother's cousin teaches. Let me see if I can hook you up, because there just isn't that much information about methods. So Creighton worked very well as newlyweds, in that I don't know that we really had proper instruction in it. And so there were just a lot of available days, because looking back now with the knowledge I have, we weren't really using the early dry day rule properly. So we were just having a great time.
Hey, I mean, love your spouse.
So yeah, our first introduction as a couple was really that sunshine and rainbows version of NFP, just because I don't know that we were properly instructed, like looking back with the knowledge I have now. And so for us, the abstinence window was like maybe 7-8 days. Because,
oh, wow. Yeah. So it was really short.
Because
it really was just like a week.
Yeah, it really was. And the thing was, at the time, we really weren't necessarily trying to avoid seriously. So I had started prenatals. We had been talking about, in the fall. So we were married in 2018. And so we'd been talking about fall of 2018, trying anyway. And God has a great sense of humor
because
we were actually on another Eagle Eye retreat. So this would have been 2 years after we'd met. We were on a retreat as newlyweds. And I was, I don't know. I feel like when you learn NFP, you get a better sense of your cycle. You know what's normal for you.
Right.
So I'd been like, I must be pregnant. Like my period's not here. And my husband is like, you're not even late. Like you're not even late. And he was actually going on assignment for like 3 months out of state. I was going to be staying with my parents again. I was like, I know I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant. He's like, you're not pregnant. I'm going to the airport. You'll be fine. I get a pregnancy test that night, and I have to Zoom him from a different state and tell him, congratulations, you've left me to go who knows where, and I'm pregnant. So that was like, I assume that would be considered like a user error for Creighton, but it may have had something to do with instruction. But at the same time, we were very happy because, it was around our window of trying. But, things definitely changed after we had our daughter, and I was postpartum. And that's that's prompted my journey as an instructor was the fact I'd kind of been handed to another instructor postpartum. He had the audacity to ask me, are you sure you're not pregnant, when I'm stressed about postpartum discharge? And I was like, you know what? I thought that was your job. Like, I'm not going to teach you.
I don't know. Yeah. You're teaching me here.
And so I think, postpartum charting is a whole nother game. And I think that's where sort of abstinence hit us over the side of the head. Mm-hmm. Whereas, as newlyweds, we cared very little about it. Especially having return of fertility, and pretty much every cycle since then has been its own sort of puzzle.
Yep.
I mean, I had return of fertility like exactly a year ago now, and pretty much every cycle has been a lot different. So you
gotta get your magnifying glass out and like,
oh my word. So this has really been sort of the season of life where we've had to grow a lot in communication, and how do we keep romance in a relationship when physical intimacy is off the table for a little while? So that's been something we've been navigating definitely from the beginning, because as newlyweds, when you're sexually active and you have all of these available days, and then suddenly your fertile window hits, my love language is physical affection. So any sort of ceasefire in like physical touch, I'm just like, just tell me you want to leave me. Like, I don't know what else to tell. Like, so that's definitely an area for growth.
Oh, I love that. I wasn't sure how you're gonna finish that sentence. You're like, that has definitely been a area for growth. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, let's just jump into it then. So let's talk about how has abstinence deepened your relationship with your spouse, and kind of how have you grown to appreciate, maybe appreciate isn't even the right word, but appreciate abstinence more?
Yeah. So for us, it definitely sort of like structures our evenings differently. Mm-hmm. So, we put down our daughter, and those are times where we're big board gamers. Like since we've gotten married, we've just amassed this enormous collection. And so
when are you inviting me over? Because I'm totally down.
It's no joke. It's no joke. Like, how can you tell an NFP couple from their house, oh, it's full of board games?
Oh, they play board games. Oh, that they must practice NFP.
What's more fun than sex? I guess board games. I don't know. So, because my love language is physical affection, that's how I assume everybody loves to be loved. But this period of abstinence that happens every cycle is actually a really valuable time for me, because my husband's love language is quality time. So, when I've had my daughter down for the day, I'm like, oh, this is my time. But it really sort of like draws my attention to the fact that this man appreciates when I spend time with him. And so being like, hey, I would love to be off doing this or reading any number of books that I have stacked, but why don't we play a board game? Like, this is something that you love. And I can always tell that, after we've done that, just the mood has completely changed. Like he feels so happy that I've spent that time with him. And so things like that, where we find other ways of doing things that make us feel loved. And so for him, that may be, we watch a stupid sitcom and he just like cuddles me, like, because if I don't have like somebody's hand on me at any time, I will just shrivel up and die. So like he knows that that's how I feel loved. Yeah. And so, we end up having these evenings where we both feel emotionally fulfilled, even though, we weren't able to maybe be physically intimate that evening. And so that's just been a practice that's developed as we've sort of learned how we both feel loved and what makes us both happy, and what are things as a couple that we enjoy doing together that like we have to stop and like consciously make a decision to do.
Right. And I feel like what I'm hearing from you is that like it is building up your selflessness. Mm-hmm. And so you're having to, on a cyclical basis, step outside of yourself and say, okay, how can I love my spouse in other ways than just sex? And that is so important to know, because especially when, and I feel like we talk about the love languages quite a bit. It just like pops into this podcast all the time because I think it's fantastic. And it's just such a great way to, be able to, I don't know, get to know your spouse really well and understand that aspect. But when one person in a spousal relationship, when their love language is not physical intimacy or physical touch, then there are like a myriad of other ways to love them. Well, and even if like both of you are physical touch, right, there's still a myriad of different ways to love your spouse. And there's secondary love languages, right? You're always going to have kind of a primary and a secondary and a tertiary. And so, stepping outside of that self, outside of yourself, not that self, and like taking a look at the situation and really thinking about and getting creative and like what would my spouse really appreciate right now? What would be something I can give my spouse if I can't give myself right now because we're trying to avoid? I can give him time. I can give him a gift, right? If the love language is gift giving, I can, whatever. I can't even think of the other love languages right now.
Gifts, acts of service, quality time, physical touch, words of affirmation is a big one for me.
Oh yeah.
And I think you're right. When you have this perspective, it's so valuable for a conversation. And I find that if you don't know about these love languages, this can be a really valuable sort of starting point for that, because, I'll have conversations with my friends like, okay, what's his love language? What's your love language? Like, why aren't you feeling fulfilled? And they'll be like, what are you talking about? I'm like,
what are these words that you're speaking to me? Like, I have a website and a book for you.
It's just, it can be so valuable and sort of, touching on how can we, get what you want out of this relationship and make your partner also feel loved in this relationship. Because that's one thing that especially sort of when we throw abstinence into this equation, when you have a love language like physical touch, if you don't have the awareness to know that other people don't share your love language and don't feel loved the same way, you may be missing out on a really great way to deepen your relationship with your spouse or make them feel really loved in that moment. It's very easy for me to be like, let's play this new board game. Like, I know that's going to make you so happy. And, it's a great way to like use up a couple hours. I can always tell just how happy he is after that, you've struck the right chord there.
Right. It's like, when you've done it, when you,
yeah.
That's so important, Jamie, is understanding. Cause I think, like, personally, before I learned about the love languages, and I think I learned about them in college in like a communication class. And like, before I learned about them, I really did assume that everyone loved the way I did and wanted the same things. And it, like, at the time I was dating my now husband, and it was like just this eye-opening thing. I was like, oh my gosh, we don't have the same love language.
Yeah.
This is why we sometimes get into arguments.
Yes.
I get it now. Like, my love language is primarily like quality time. I feel like we're actually like the opposite of you and your husband, Jamie. And so, yeah, it was just like, it was so eye-opening. Like, oh my gosh, no wonder.
Yep, exactly. It's really crazy when you start to realize that all of these people, and not only that, they show you love differently maybe than they receive it. So, like, my husband loves quality time, like acts of service are his way of showing love, and I love him to bits, but that's not even in my top 2. And so he'll be like, well, I did all these things for you. I'm like, you didn't tell me I was beautiful enough today.
I need you to give me a hug and tell me I look fantastic. That's what I need.
I'm so glad you really
dug
a garden bed by hand and laid mulch in it and glued bricks together. But you can just tell me you want to leave me. It's like, what is wrong with you?
Oh man. Yes. So to sum that conversation up, love languages are super important, everybody.
Absolutely.
And if you and your spouse haven't gone through, I'll link this in the show notes, but the website for the love languages, it has a couple of like quizzes that you can just take. And then it'll give you kind of some basic information. I mean, the book is fantastic. The book gives you lots and lots of information. But the quizzes are a really great place to start. And just kind of in understanding like the differences that you and your spouse have. And I think, it can really help the period of abstinence time. But then also, like, on the flip side, it can really help the periods when sex is on the table.
Yes.
If one of, if either you or your spouse, your love language is not physical touch, and the other, and your spouse is, or whatever, if one of you isn't and one of you is, physical touch, then that can actually really help too in conversations during that time, because sometimes it's like, it's not even on the radar of someone who doesn't have the love language of physical touch, if physical touch is like way down on their love languages. And so, sorry, we're kind of getting off topic of the abstinence thing, but anyway, love languages are fantastic. So take the time to take those quizzes.
Yeah, it can be really valuable for sure.
So, tell me about what other kinds of advice or kind of knowledge have you gained from just like better understanding of abstinence in your relationship, and what kind of advice would you give to other people in similar situations, right? In that postpartum time when abstinence is like hits you on the side, like the side of the head, like,
it can be a very difficult time. And so, one thing that has been really important for us is like keeping the spark alive, so that, neither spouse feels like it's an aversion that the other has suddenly developed. Like, we still very much are in love with each other. We very much want each other. And so that could be times where, we're very playful verbally, or, because he knows that I like touch, that'll be something playful during the day where, we're very much aware that we're in love with each other, and the spark hasn't died despite the fact he saw me birth a baby, because that was one of the most beautiful things. And, that's
quite an experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. For both parties. And so, for us, making sure that we have that reassurance with each other, that playfulness is still there, that joy is still there. This has been a very weird cycle for me. I'm on cycle day 62. Yes.
Yeah.
So this has definitely been one of those cycles. And so sometimes it's, taking naps together during the day, like being physically present with each other, while also recognizing that there just is there's a lot of sacrifice involved in marriage, right? Whether it's, dying to self to make sure the toddler stays alive and someone can go downstairs and do a podcast, or,
that sounds like our situation. I literally can hear my husband upstairs running around with the toddler. I feel like you probably can too.
Yeah, they're outside digging in the garden.
Yep,
exactly. So it's giving each other times when they need it. It's giving each other words of affirmation. We're doing a lot of scheming and dreaming together right now, so our nights are kind of filled with that and with watching silly things, because we both have a very weird, dry sense of humor, and so we try to find things that like hit the spot for us. And that's fun because it's just led to a lot of like fun inside jokes that we carry throughout the day. So on nights where maybe we're not upstairs all night, like we're doing other things that are like enriching just our day-to-day lives together, which has just been so fun. But I will say it can be hard when intentions are lopsided. So, my daughter's now 2, and there's one spouse who would really like to have another, and there's one who's not quite on board yet. And so that's where I really appreciate this sort of like redesigning of NFP as fertility awareness and discernment, because, we're very aware of where I am in my cycle, what my fertility would be. And the discernment bit is kind of like, let's just tie a giant boulder around you and throw you into the middle of a lake. Like, it's hard.
It's very hard.
Oh my gosh. And so that's what, I would say, like, approach those conversations with grace. Constantly pray about it and pray about God's will. But, also just acknowledge where your spouse is. Because like that lopsided sort of, I don't know, desire, or, I don't know, it can be really hard. And so there's been a lot of joy recently, but there have been a lot of tough conversations. And I had to tell him yesterday, listen, we can have this argument once a day. Once we hit that quota, we'll shelve it till tomorrow, because like emotionally, we can't handle this. We need to, redirect this energy into something else.
Right.
So, that's where prayer comes into play with the abstinence portion of it, for sure. Because obviously, every day it's a good idea to do that with your spouse. And
right. You should always pray with your spouse, but it becomes particularly necessary when you're really discerning, or right, when you have different intentions, or not that you have different intentions, but just kind of different thoughts about where you are at exactly. in the discernment area, which can be very, very difficult.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's like, what's an Olympic sport, or what feels like an Olympic sport but isn't, but should be an Olympic sport? Discerning with fertility awareness.
Yes,
I think a gold medal.
There should be medals.
Conversations gracefully every day without like causing one of us to leave the house. It requires a lot of love.
Yes, exactly, and a lot of love that isn't physical touch.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what? There's where it all comes together, right? It would be very easy to redirect a conversation with sex, right? And just shelve it and get a good rush of hormones that maybe makes you both ignore the issue for a little while. So when you have these sorts of conversations during times of periodic abstinence, suddenly you have to like face these issues head on. It is really hard, like there isn't that sort of big red button that, can end the conversation in a very pleasant way. Like you have to actually do that with your words, and it's hard.
Man, nobody ever said being Catholic was hard or was easy.
Exactly. I mean, that's not the vibe I would get from any of the years of church history.
Nope, not at all. Oh my gosh. I want to circle back to one other thing that you were saying before we wrap up. But just you were talking about how you and your husband are doing a lot of like dreaming and scheming right now. Yeah. And I love that. And I think that is just such a fantastic thing to do, anytime with your spouse. But when you are in a period of abstinence, that is such a good time to dream about your lives together. Where do you want to be in 5 years? What kind of jobs do you want to have? Where do you want to live? Where do you want to be financially? Where do you want to be, kids wise? And just having those dreaming conversations and laying them out, and then even going beyond the dreaming conversation and then starting to set some goals for those kind of things, that can be really exciting and very empowering for you and your spouse. And it's definitely something that takes up an evening. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
You're looking for one of those activities.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing that's so great about the fertility awareness aspect of all of this is like, there's a hormonal reason why you're suddenly so energetic and full of all these plans. Like tap into that rising estrogen, because yes, it makes your libido skyrocket. But that will carry on into the luteal phase just fine. Yeah. But you can tap into that energy because it's very easy to, my husband's an engineer, so he has Excel spreadsheets. So like when we find a house with a location, he'll insert into this thing, and it like there are gradations of colors based on the optimal,
Oh my gosh.
It's so funny. Yeah. He's, he can see how it fits into all of these conditions that we have. And you look up from at the clock and like 2.5, 3 hours have passed, and you've just been doing stuff that connects you to, shows that you're on the same team, that you have these interesting goals for, the both of you. So it can be really fulfilling.
Yeah. Well, and as just kind of a final thought, I think one of the things that you have really touched on quite a bit is finding activities that obviously aren't sex, that fulfill you both. Like you talked about, watching a silly sitcom together, and your husband's got, his arm around you, right? So he's helping to fulfill your need for physical touch as your love language, and you're helping to fulfill his need for quality time together. And that's awesome. So like thinking about putting your two love languages together, and what are activities outside of the realm of sex that can bring you together and fulfill both of your needs, whatever those, and I highly suggest use the love languages, because I think that makes it really easy.
Yeah, for sure. You've got the framework right there for you. And, even though it's generalized, right, there's 5 of them, just the amount of combinations and sort of a person's background really makes those things personal. Right. So, I know based on my husband's, family history and sort of his childhood experience, like I know what's special for him and what really makes him feel loved, while also like looking at these 5 categories.
Exactly.
So it seems kind of funny, but like really it's so deeply personal, and it can be such a valuable tool.
Definitely. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing just some really great tips and insights into, navigating that periodic abstinence, or even navigating like a longer stretch of abstinence. Like postpartum time can be much longer stretches of abstinence depending on the woman and the hormones and the method and all sorts of other things. So thank you so much for your time. And thanks for being on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for listening. Links to learn more about the 5 love languages are going to be in the show notes, as well as if you want to reach out to or connect with Jamie, her Instagram info is in the show notes. As always, if you are not following us on Instagram at Charting Toward Intimacy, please do. And please reach out if you have questions or comments or ideas about future episodes. I love hearing from you guys. Until next time.